Thanks for tuning in to the Drive On podcast, where we talk about issues affecting veterans after they get out of the military. Before we get started, I'd like to ask a favor. If you haven't done so already, please rate and review the show on Apple Podcasts. If you've already done that, thank you. These ratings help the show get discovered so it can reach a wider audience. And while you're there, click the subscribe button so that you get notified of new episodes as soon as they come out. If you don't use Apple Podcasts, you can visit driveonpodcast.com/subscribe to find other ways of subscribing, including our email list. I'm your host, Scott DeLuzio, and now, let's get on with the show. Hey everyone, thanks for joining us. Today, my guest is Bunny Young, who is an Army wife and founder of A Better Place Consulting, where she teaches burnout prevention strategies to military and law enforcement personnel. So welcome to the show. Why don't you tell us a little bit about yourself and your background?
Yeah, so I think you nailed it with Army wife. I'm a third generation, actually fourth generation Army wife, granddaughter, daughter, and great granddaughter. So we have a fort named after our family. So it's definitely, the Army is in my blood. And so I'll be the first one to harass anybody who's not Army and the first one to stand up for anybody who messes with any of us. So, I often tell people I hold the highest ranking position in the United States military, and that's wife, because I can speak to anyone in any certain manner and the repercussions will be push-ups upon my spouse, not upon me. So I went to school to be a therapist. That's when I got my master's degree in. I lived in China for about a year. I volunteered in Ecuador at an orphanage, and just really through those experiences was exposed to a lot of trauma. And through growing up, I think when you grow up in a military family, there are certain things that seem par for the course for you. And, when you're asked to give a sit rep, it's kind of like just the basics. It's no feelings, no emotion. The worst thing my father ever told me was that he was disappointed in me. And, that's just because of the trust and respect that was built. But my entire childhood was definitely built on these core values and service to a purpose higher than yourself. And I have a heart condition, so I know everybody's going to give me a hard time about this in my family, but the Air Force turned me down because of my heart condition. I'll have you know, I scored really high on my ASVAB, and so the way that we figure it out is if you're brilliant, you can go Air Force or Chair Force, as we like to call it. If you're brilliant and strong, then you can go Army. If you're not brilliant but strong, you got Marines. If you're not brilliant, not strong, and you can swim, it's Coast Guard. And if you're not brilliant, not strong, and you can't swim, it's the Navy. So
that's an interesting hierarchy there. I like that.
That's how the recruiters figure it out. So that really brought me to this aspect of an organizational psychology approach, where a lot of people were burning out because of their professional demands, and then having marital or familial issues because of the stress of their professional demands, whether it be first responders or military or just a job in corporate America. And also being able to tie the purpose. I don't know a corporate situation that puts you through the brainwashing that the military does, in order to say, like, the life that you had prior to when you stepped foot off of that school bus, and with your rucksack and everything is over. Like, we own you now. Mm-hmm. And here's your new definition. Here's your new identity. Here's your new call to life. And I think that's also something that a lot of families struggle with, because as a spouse, you're supposed to be the most important thing to your loved one. And as coming into this, I understood that it was going to be the Army before me and the Army before our children. And it all changes in a matter of a moment. So, just the two people that laugh when I make plans are God and the Army. And so that's really my background, and kind of the approach that I took was, how can we bring basic training and the thought process around core values, purpose, mission, vision, and, your abilities and your MOS into a work-life alignment.
So how do you do that? How does that process look like, where you bring these values together and work towards the goal of, ultimately, reducing the amount of burnout and the overall stress, and creating a better, well-being for these individuals?
So if you go past 6 years in the military, PsyOps is going to show you that it's really if I asked you what your core values are, they're going to be the military branch that you serve's core values. You have fully adopted that identity, which makes transition back to civilian life very difficult, because it's very difficult to find a company that stands at that high level of core values. And so from a civilian side, we help individuals identify what their core values are, what's going to make them feel fulfilled in life. And, from the military side, being able to hear, like, the only time that I really feel fulfilled is when I'm flat on my belly looking through a scope. And how do we apply that to the civilian side to say, basically that's a career in law enforcement or special like ops within law enforcement and first responders, or as a trainer. But even that sometimes doesn't fulfill you. And so it's that constant analysis and self-awareness. And that's really something that is difficult when you're transitioning out of the military, is that self-awareness. Nobody asks you what you think. And so to be able to say, like, how do you feel about this, is very difficult. And in the civilian life, believe it or not, like, we're not asked what we want to be when we grow up anymore. We're not asked what we think. You're given this onboarding procedure that is like drinking out of a fire hose to say, here's all the boundaries and here's all the things that are important to our company. But nobody says, what's really important to you? And that's supposed to be for what your therapist deals with. And so when we infiltrate companies, we say, no, like, you're a human. And we have to address the human aspect of it. And even from the military aspect of it, we're doing more proactive planning. So to hopefully decrease the amount of military and veteran suicide, and to combat post-traumatic stress, because, that's really where you're supposed to be fine. Well, in the therapeutic world, FINE stands for effed up, insecure, neurotic, and emotional. And we've found, even from the structure of support groups sometimes, where, you're coming in and it's like, well, I had this blow up next to me and I was shot 15 times. And then you've got somebody who, just suffered the trauma of just watching somebody die. And it's like, your broken arm doesn't necessarily hurt any less than my splinter, but the structure of the current support groups, or the support groups of the past, can feel a little bit like, I want to use like a inappropriate word, but like a pissing match.
Sure.
And that's not what we want. We want to create an environment where it feels open and like we can share, and that we're not re-traumatized by sharing and not feeling like our feelings are valid. Like,
Mm-hmm.
my husband and I had this conversation the other day, because I was in a car accident last year and I have post-traumatic stress around driving. And I had post-traumatic stress from a sexual assault prior to that. And my neural pathways didn't differentiate those two things. They just processed them together, as if in the car accident, somehow, like, I was re-traumatized. And our daughter was just messing with me, and I walked out of a room and she jumped onto my back, and I immediately had a reaction that most of you probably can empathize with, of I got her off of me and was not in my body at that moment.
Mm-hmm.
And so I had to sit down and have a conversation with my husband, and he's comparing, like, you were just in an accident. I know people who are blown up. And I'm like, but my body and my brain don't know that. And so how do we approach it from the human perspective and identify that each human is different? And regardless of the fact that we're all going to have the same uniform, we're all going to have the same haircut, we're all going to have the same credos, like, we are different humans. And how do we process that?
Right. And so, and I appreciate you sharing the story of your experience, and how different situations can create some sort of post-traumatic stress in different individuals, where one person may have had post-traumatic stress from, like you were saying, watching someone blow up, or themselves getting injured, or even in your case, a car accident or
Mm-hmm.
a sexual assault or something along those lines. Those all are traumatic events. If you were to take any one of those and look at them in and of themselves, they're all traumatic.
Mm-hmm.
And so it makes sense that there would be some sort of post-traumatic stress that happens during those. And so just because you weren't blown up in that car accident, it doesn't mean that you aren't deserving of the, I don't want to say recognition, because that's not the right word, but that the treatment that comes with the post-traumatic stress, maybe it comes from some sort of counseling or therapy or whatever the case may be, but you're just as deserving for something like that as someone else who was in combat and saw atrocious things happening as well. So that does make a lot of sense that that type of thing happens. So I appreciate that you shared the differences between the different levels that
Yeah.
people might think of, but they're not really different levels. They're really one and the same.
Yeah. And one of my favorite therapeutic sayings is, I have not walked in your shoes, but I'm willing to sit here and listen to you helping me understand what that felt like.
Mm-hmm.
And sometimes that's just a magical space. And for Army families that are listening to this, and military families that are listening to this, there is something called compassion fatigue, or secondary trauma, where no, you were not there. You were not deployed with your loved one, but you are experiencing secondary trauma from watching your loved one go through the struggle of this trauma.
Mm-hmm.
And so those are both very real things, and whatever route you feel necessary in order to get support, my encouragement would be to get support. It doesn't make you weak. In fact, I think for the most part, I've experienced it takes more courage and bravery to sit down and say, I've got, stuff going on, than it does to say I'm fine.
For sure. It does. Yeah. Because the easiest thing you could do is just ignore things and keep doing what you've always been doing.
Mm-hmm.
But it's not always the right thing. And sometimes it's hard to admit that you have a problem with some post-traumatic stress or whatever your individual case may be. And to go get that type of help that you need, it's not the most comfortable thing to do.
No.
I will say from my own personal experience, once when you do pick up the phone and make that appointment and you actually verbalize saying that, whatever the problem is, it does feel like a weight's being lifted off your shoulders. It did in my case anyways, where I picked up the phone, I called, and I like immediately felt like I'm no longer carrying this weight by myself. I now have somebody else who's going to be there. I haven't necessarily met with the person yet, but I have that person who's going to be there, who's going to help me carry some of this weight and figure out what to do with it too. So it's not constantly sitting on my shoulders.
Mm-hmm.
So that's another, I think, good kind of analogy that people can make as well to, whether or not they're in the midst of trying to decide whether or not they want to go to, therapy or whatever treatment type thing that they need. It could actually be very beneficial.
Mm-hmm.
So we're here really talking about, burnout and how you kind of help people with the strategies that they can use to prevent burnout. And before we started recording, I was looking at your bio, and you have quite a lot going on between running like 4 companies currently, I think is what your bio was saying. You run 4 companies, and you're also a mother with 2 kids and an Army wife. And I have to imagine there's probably other things going on, but I also imagine that at some point you felt burnt out yourself. So have you ever dealt with a burnout, and how did that look?
Oh, I would say dozens of times. I think I have a PhD in burnout just from experience. If we did an analogy of how many tours of burnout I've had, it would be a lot. So, and I think a lot of that goes to not being able to differentiate what my emotions are versus what I'm experiencing from others. And as a therapist, it was very difficult for me, especially in social services, to separate my emotions from that of my clients. I cared too much. And that, some people would be like, that's not possible. Well, when it negatively impacts your health, your well-being, and your ability to function, yes, it is possible. And so there's 5 stages of burnout. And the first one's that honeymoon stage. And so if we want to take it through a military analogy, you're going to be deployed to Kosovo, right? And so there's that initial dump of adrenaline. It's like, yeah, we're going to go do this, you know, and it's your body's natural reaction to be like, yes, this is going to be hard. This is going to be stressful, but I'm doing this with my brothers and sisters, and like, let's go do this. And then we get into the stress phase of burnout, and then we get into the chronic stress phase, and then we get into actual burnout. And so this is where you start to see the disengagement. And this is where you start to see, you know, more of the agitation and more of the kind of like just the person's not who they once were. And then you get into the habitual burnout, which is not a place that you can never return from, but it's a place that ends up having possibly permanent impact on your mental, physical, spiritual, and emotional well-being. And a person who is in habitual burnout, you know, is not fulfilling their potential in a way that is prioritizing their own health. And so, you know, I often tell people, when you think about burnout, you think, oh, it's the worst thing in the world. Well, you know, burnout is something that we all experience at certain periods of time. I'm sure after watching Princess Bride for the 15th time with my daughter, I'm a little burned out of it. Like that's okay. And, you know, just to be kind of over it. Mm-hmm. And, you know, but if I'm sitting there and start to just not even have those associations or feelings or responses, and I'm not even engaged with the movie anymore, I'm not even engaged with her, and I'm not laughing, I'm not experiencing the emotions. And after the movie's done, I'm just kind of a shell of myself. And all of my reactions are pretty extreme. Like it's either zero reaction or extreme reactions. Mm-hmm. That's a sign of habitual burnout. And you can see that with multiple tours and multiple deployments in quick and rapid succession. And then you can also see it in individuals that, you know, have been at a job that they don't feel fulfills their calling and fulfills their purpose. And they end up applying themselves initially with that excitement and honeymoon phase of, oh, this is going to be such a well-paying job. And then very quickly, years, if not sooner down the road, they're in habitual burnout. And it doesn't always have to go in that order. I mean, mm-hmm. This is an order that some therapist somewhere put together and said, here are the phases of burnout. But you could easily jump into habitual burnout and then find some kind of vacation and get back into just chronic stress. So yeah.
Yeah. So you can jump between these stages, but these are kind of the different degrees of burnout that you might mm-hmm. be experiencing. And, you know, the honeymoon stage that you're talking about, that first stage, actually probably sounds pretty fun to mm-hmm. a lot of people. This is like, yeah, it's going to suck, but I'm going to enjoy it. It's almost like the basic training. If you're looking forward to going to that, it's like, you know, it's going to suck. You know, there's going to be people screaming in your face. You know, you're going to be tired and dirty and, you know, all this stuff. But when you're going through that, it sucks, but you can look back on it later and kind of, be proud of the thing that you accomplished, whatever it is. I use basic training as an example, but there's plenty of other things that suck. There's that embrace the suck mindset that people have.
There you go. I knew you were going to go there.
And it's perfect. It's a perfect analogy. That's for the honeymoon stage. But I can definitely see how people slip into these other stages that I wrote down here. And especially with the disengagement that you're talking about, when you get to that burnout stage, that is definitely a thing that people deal with. So how do you balance these things? Everybody has a lot of things going on in their life. They oftentimes don't feel like they have enough time to do all of the things, whether it's their job or their family or other things in between. They don't have time for all of this stuff. How do you balance all of these things so that you can avoid burning out?
So I don't balance anything. I align it.
Okay.
I think balance is BS, because if you think about a teeter-totter, somebody's down, somebody's up. I've never been on a teeter-totter where we've been able to perfectly balance it. And me being 6'3", I'm normally the one who is like sitting on their butt on the bottom as the person is like teetering high up in the air. So, I like to think about alignment. When you wake up, your first priority is always to yourself. Even as a soldier, as a military service individual, your first priority is to yourself. You cannot be the best that you can be without being the best mentally, physically, spiritually, and emotionally. And so we're bringing a lot more meditation, ironically enough, starting with the Marines, on the meditation and being able to have that self-awareness. And self-awareness is different than thinking for yourself. And because we would never ask a Marine to think for themselves, but it's an awareness of what's going on. I know the comments you're going to get on this podcast, and I just can't wait for it. Especially from my own Marine friends. They know I love them. So, but being able to be aware of your physiological reactions to stress and to emotions and how you wake up in the morning. And then also what you're saying to yourself. So that moves into self-management. So you go self-awareness and self-management. And then after you have those abilities and you've taught that to everybody on your team or your unit, then you go into team awareness and team management. And this is where I can look at my battle buddy and know when there's disengagement, when there's habitual burnout, and when I know that, they're not going to be the best for that day. And then I need them to, get their shit straight so that we can move on. And so we have this culture of suck it up, and we're changing that. And that is being changed, because there's only so many times that you can suck it up. And so being able to move through that self-awareness, self-management, team awareness, team management. So when I wake up in the morning, the first thing that I'm going to do is make sure that I'm doing a meditation. I have a journal. I'm doing some fitness. I try to fill all four parts of the self, which are physical, mental, emotional, and spiritual. And whatever spiritual means to you, like it, even if it's just, this is my rifle. There are many like them, and this is the only one. Right. This one's mine. That's spiritual for some people. Mm-hmm. And for others, it may be prayer. And so that's the four parts of the self. And that's really to make sure that those are in alignment. And then the rest of your day, align it around through that focus. What gets you through the day, I'd imagine, because I have not been there in anyone's boots on the battlefield, but what gets you through the day and pulling that trigger are your battle buddies, and in knowing that ultimately you're fulfilling a higher purpose. And that's what gets you through all the rest of the tough crap. And so if you can align your day on, I'm going to get through the tough stuff, and not say that my whole day is going to go to crap because I had this bad experience, but that I'm still here and I'm going to go home and today is going to be a better day. We have this amazing capacity to change our minds and our attitudes in the blink of an eye. And so you choose what your perspective is going to be. And, that is how you can wake up and say, today's going to suck. I need a cough drop and I need some tissues because I'm not feeling good. No one's going to bring you cough drops and tissues, in the sandbox. It's not going to happen. So what are you going to tell yourself so that your day can get better from there?
Yeah, there's Something I heard a little while ago, if to kind of put what you were saying into some sort of perspective about not letting your day just go to shit because
Yeah.
something bad happened. If someone was to give you $86,400, and I know it's an oddly specific number, but bear with me. If someone gave you $86,400 today, and you'd be on, you'd probably be, I'd imagine, very happy with receiving all of this. So you'd be very happy. But then all of a sudden, someone came around and stole $100 from you. Would you throw away the rest of the $86,300 to go chase after that $100?
Hmm.
No, like you wouldn't. That wouldn't make sense, because it's like, well, that you're leaving a whole lot on the table
Yeah.
to go chase after that $100. But we all have 86,400 seconds in a day, and if someone stole 100 seconds of happiness, let's just
Yeah.
say, from you in that day, would you throw away the rest of the day just because someone decided to take away, a couple minutes of happiness from you? Like, that doesn't make a whole lot of sense. And so, to what you were saying, about how, you can't just throw all that away, and while you're going through your day. So,
Remember that the 6 inches between your ears is precious real estate. And don't let somebody live rent free in your head.
right.
And also, when somebody says something to you that pisses you off, chances are the meanest voice that you have ever heard on the face of this planet comes from that voice in the back of your head. And so take stock in why what they said pissed you off, and either agree that they don't need to be a part of your life, or deal with the trigger that just happened in the back of your head.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, absolutely. And how could people deal with some of those triggers that come up?
So, I mean, for me, sometimes it's so funny. I have a variety of exercises for this, but sometimes I tell people to imagine that the voice in the back of your head is just that shitty roommate. And you just tell them to go to their room, shut the door, and like, you don't want to talk to them anymore. And, it's a funny analogy, but at the same time, like, just that's fine. For Harry Potter fans, like, I often think about the Albus Dumbledore scene where he takes this like memory or whatever, and like he pulls his wand and pulls it out of his brain and like throws it away. And I've literally done this at a stoplight, and the guy next to me like looked to see where the litter was that landed like out of that. And so what I say to the person is, thank you for that feedback. I'm going to need some time to process that. Or I don't necessarily agree with what you said, but I respect your ability to have that opinion.
Mm-hmm.
And we went through this with the Kaepernick situation. I was hot. Like, we have a thing in our household that says we interrupt this marriage to bring you football season. I am the football fanatic. Like, my husband, he doesn't really care. So my husband and my dad are over, and it's Sunday afternoon, and I watch this go down, and I am just freaking hot. And like, my husband and my dad just look at me and they're like, nope, that's why we do this, is so that he has the ability to take a knee if he wants to. Like, it's his freedom. And I'm like, oh my gosh, like that's human perspective. Little did I know, come to find out, that he actually went to a veteran and said, I want to make this stand, but I want to do it in the most respectful way possible. And I don't think sitting on the bench is. And he actually received that feedback that taking a knee would be the most respectful way to bring awareness to that. So, just when somebody says something and you want to react, it's okay to react, but don't react with emotion. React with information. Like, I needed more information in that moment rather than just getting totally hot. First off, I'm sitting there, ready to go to blows because it's my family that you're disrespecting, and my family has a completely different perspective than I do. Secondly, I didn't know this person's story who is doing this. I knew why he was doing this, but it wasn't his intention to disrespect our flag or disrespect our country. And so I think that in this world, it's a really incredible time to be able to just say, what did you mean by that?
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that especially these days, it needs to happen more often because people are very quick to jump to conclusions. on all sorts of issues, whether it's
Mhm.
political or social, issues that are going on. People just jump to conclusions. They
Mhm.
assume that the other people have the worst of intentions, and they don't. I got to imagine that most people are probably pretty good people. There are definitely some people out there who have bad intentions, um, and they actually want to see the world burn. But I don't think that's the vast majority of people either.
Well, and with burnout, to put your point, as far as the $100,
Hmm.
how much money did I just burn, and how many seconds did I burn, like going to couch coaching Kaepernick?
Hmm.
Like, first off, he definitely didn't hear me. None of my teams have ever heard me, but I'm the best couch coach in the world. So, but that's the kind of thing, is check your emotions and how much you're dumping into that, because that can significantly save you time and energy in the burnout space.
Exactly. Yeah. Because you end up losing more than that, in that analogy, you end up losing more than that $100, because yeah, sure, someone stole that $100 from you, but you end up losing the 200, 300, 400, 500 as you're chasing
Yeah.
it down and trying to, like in your case, yelling at the television about,
Yeah.
whatever was going on. You
Yeah.
end up losing more than whatever was initially lost,
Yeah.
instead of, kind of the flip side to that is, maybe like, yeah, hey, I don't really agree with that. That sucks, whatever the thing is. And just kind of let it go. And
And what are you modeling for your children? And how many seconds are you stealing from other people?
right.
Because, how many of us leave work pissed off and come home and take it out on the closest things to us?
Hmm.
So, like my husband calls me on it all the time, because I'll come home and have that SHIT day, like, and, I'm in a crappy mood, but then, like, here's service dog is sleeping behind me. Like, I crawl in bed and just cuddle with him like he's the best thing since sliced bread. My husband's like, why does he get that treatment when you have a crap day, but like I'm having to deal with everything else? And I'm like, well, I don't know, he's cuter. So, but yeah, so just think about that from a real estate perspective, from your own brain, and then how it impacts those around you.
So some of the things that you were talking about earlier, the morning routine, maybe the meditation, the journaling, the spiritual, whether it's praying or whatever the case may be, all those things are good ways to start the day. But what about for somebody who already feels like they don't have enough time in the day, and it feels like that's just adding more things onto their plate, and that might sound a little cumbersome to them. What would you say to people who feel like they don't have enough time in the day to for really anything?
So what are you going to say no to? And your calendar is yours. There's a magical white space on your calendar sometime in the next few weeks or months or however it is. And so if that's where you start, by planning to wake up at 5 a.m., New Year's resolutions, it doesn't matter. You can start tomorrow. So, but what would you, if you knew, like when I was diagnosed with my heart condition, if you knew that your time on earth was limited, what would you stop doing and stop wasting time on right now? And I guarantee you, if you're like me, Facebook would be the first thing to go.
For sure.
Like, if you have a digital well-being app on your phone and you know how much time you waste on social media and email and all that kind of stuff, I check my email once a day, once every couple days. I mean, you emailed me, there's an autoresponder that just says good luck and Godspeed, if you're going to get a response to this. And so it's like, email doesn't make me happy. Facebook really doesn't make me happy. And so what are you going to stop doing? You have the same amount of time as Elon Musk, Dwight Eisenhower, any of these individuals that, yes, I'm an Ike fan. Go ahead and leave your comments on that too, but he's a better golfer than you. So, that's kind of the thing. I had a friend of mine, companies send me like journals and different kind of professional and personal development products to try out. And ironically enough, I had this journal that was sent to me. And then a lawyer friend of mine was like, you need to start using this journal. And I had the same response of like, when would you like me to start taking the time to write down my thoughts and put little pretty like hearts next to it? This is not middle school. I'm an adult. I'm not doing this. But the key thing about the journal is that it every morning and every night there's gratitude. So every morning and every night I'm starting and stopping my day with what I'm grateful for. Huge mindset shift. And in today's targets, there's only 3 instead of a to-do list that's a mile long. And so I think that asking yourself what you're willing to stop doing in order to prioritize what you want to be doing and what you want to be left with that legacy. You know, they talk about the dash on your tombstone.
Mm-hmm.
So do you want that dash to be that you pulled 80, 120-hour weeks? Or do you want that dash to be that, you know, you never missed a softball game or a baseball game, that you sang Frozen 2, this is me personally, at the top of my lungs to my kids last night. I'm so glad that you weren't there to record this. And, you know, those are the things that it's like, what was I actually doing at night that prevented me from doing that? Well, watching, I don't know what we were watching. Drunk History, I think, is what we were watching. It's hilarious, by the way, if you ever want to waste some time on your life. But like at the same time, Drunk History versus my kids. Stop telling yourself that you don't have time for it, because you do have time for it. You have the same amount of time as the rest of us. And remember that you may have some more time than other people around you. And so it's not so much about making time, it's about making an impact.
That's a great way to put it. And you know, when you're talking about people who are working, you know, 80-hour weeks or whatever, you know, long hours, and they're just slaving away and killing themselves basically just through this work, they don't wind up any happier. You know, they may maybe have a bigger paycheck than you or I or somebody else, and that's fine. That's nice. They might be able to buy a fancy house and fancy cars and clothes and all this other stuff, but when do they get a chance to enjoy any of that stuff and actually like sit down and relax and
Yeah.
just be present in that moment? And so, you know, that doesn't necessarily contribute to their happiness. They may feel like it's going to, but it doesn't always. Some people, their happiness is strictly tied to money, and that, you know, fine, more power to them. But
They're probably not in the military.
no, they're probably not. And they probably don't have either they probably don't have a family of their own, or not a great family life to begin with. And so, you know, where they're, you know, not focused on building their relationship and spending time with their kids, singing, you know, songs from Frozen or whatever the case may be. Like they're not there and present, in that moment. So, so I love how you put that. That was really well put there.
One quick trick is, you know, in, I guess now it's your OCPs, slide a journal in. And when you're sitting there waiting, because you never are sitting around and waiting in the Army, right? You know, just write notes to yourself, to your kids, to your family. Get the stuff that's in between your ears out on a piece of paper. The other thing is switch your cell phone to black and white mode. It makes it less attractive. And it's a huge psychological shift when you open your phone and it's in black and white. And it reminds you that you're trying to break up with that relationship and that codependency on your phone. It's very easy to make phone calls in black and white, because remember, we used to do it when cell phones first came out, and all the way back when we had landlines and rotary phones and all that kind of stuff. But switching your smartphone and turning it into a dumb phone by making it black and white and shutting off the mobile data, you can still make phone calls and texts. And then what else do you really need to be doing in that moment? What else could you be doing that would be making an impact instead of just wasting time?
Yeah, I mean, that actually hits on a point that I've been toying with the idea for myself of ditching my smartphone and just going back to a old dumb phone that had, a flip phone. You can make phone calls, and if you needed to text someone, you sat there and tapped the numbers
Yep.
27 times to get through the letters and everything like that. That would really reduce the amount of screen time that I have in my day. I haven't pulled the trigger on that yet and made the switch, but it's been something that I've been considering for a little while now. But you're right. We do spend too much time doing things that don't matter. Facebook, games on your cell phone, Angry Birds, whatever people are playing on their phones or whatever. Like, it's stuff that just doesn't matter. And so when you do that, it takes up time, and time is a valuable resource that once when it's gone, you can't get it back. And so when you find how much time you're actually spending doing these things on these screens and devices, you're absolutely right. I don't see that it could hurt to reduce the amount of time that you're spending on these things. So, is there anything else that you had lined up that you wanted to talk about? I know I do want to give people a chance to find out more about where they can get in touch with you and things like that. But was there anything else that you had that you wanted to cover before we wrap up?
As we're recording this, we're like 5 or 6 months into COVID and this pandemic, and also a lot of civil unrest. And so we put together, the team and I put together this ebook called How to Stay Sane During Insane Times. And the one thing I want you to know about that book is that it's free. And it's an ebook. You download it. It has video content in it from my home, from my life. And it's there to try to help you cope with whatever it is that you're going through. And I know that this is not going to be the last insane time that we have. And so, being able to offer you that resource is an honor and a pleasure to be able to do that. And I hope that thousands, hundreds of thousands of people take advantage of it, because sometimes when you feel like you're in the foxhole and you feel like you're totally alone, if somebody just handed you a shovel, you can either stop digging or you can figure out how to get your way out. And so that's really, if that ebook is not your resource, find your resource.
Right. And this episode is scheduled right now anyways to be coming out a couple weeks after the election in the US here. So hopefully this ebook is not needed in response to that election, but you never know. These are crazy times. 2020 has been crazy, and you never know. So anyways, thank you again. It's been a pleasure speaking with you. Could you share where people can go to get in touch with you, find out more about what you do, maybe a website or things like that?
Yeah, so betterplaceconsulting.com or bunnyyoung.com will both take you straight to that ebook. And you can hear Guinness dreaming in the background. And if you want to connect on Instagram, it's at Bunny Has Six Legs, because I have a service dog. So, and I'll also make sure that I give you all the links for the social for those that are driving while they're listening to this and just want to be able to get it afterwards. But if you message me, if you comment on something that's on social media, I'll be there for you. I have no problem making sure that I'm that person that you can rely on.
Yeah, absolutely. And like you said, I will have links to all of this, your website, social media, where to find the ebook, and everything else that you do. I have all that linked up in the show notes, so everyone can find that. Please don't crash while you're driving, trying to write this stuff down. It'll all be there for you later. So thank you again very much. Like I said, it's been a pleasure, and I really do appreciate the information that you had to share with us today.
Thank you so much for having me, and hua.
Thanks for listening to the Drive On Podcast. If you want to check out more episodes or learn more about the show, you can visit our website, driveonpodcast.com, or on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram at Drive On Podcast.